Namaste, namaste, and welcome to this short video. This is actually an introduction video for the next practice. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about how you set up for practicing breath work. So, of course, you can set up wherever you like. You can use a chair, but how you sit or how your spine is quite important. So whenever we work with breath work, we want to create as long a length in the body and as much room for the respiratory system to work as is comfortable for us to hold without strain, so that we can hold a little bit longer and perhaps enjoy a quiet moment of peaceful contemplation or meditation at the end of practice without our legs screaming at us that we need to get up and move, or without bits of us falling asleep, which is quite common when you first practice. So finding a comfortable seat is really important. I like to use a bolster if I'm sitting for any great length of time. When I'm sitting, I practice with socks on as well, because I want my feet to be nice and warm. So the bolster gives my hips a little bit of lift so that I can the pelvis is slightly tipped forward. It's much easier to sit upright than it is if you're on the floor and the pelvis is tipped the opposite way, and then it's really hard to lift upright. Because my hips don't allow my knees to come down to the floor. If yours do, that's great. You can sit on the floor, just sit with a little support. You can kneel, of course, if you prefer to kneel. You can take a chair, or you can stand for some of the practices, but it's harder to maintain that sense of stability if you're going to close your eyes if you're standing. So sitting is good for these particular practices anyway. The other thing that I like to use is a blanket, because when we're sitting for any period of time and with certain practices, our blood pressure drops and we're still, so there's less warmth coming from the movement of our muscles. And if a blanket helps you to feel comfortable for longer, then it's a great thing. And you can also wrap it underneath the body, particularly perhaps underneath the feet if you have feet that get irritated by being on a firm surface. And today we're going to do Kapalabhati or Kapalabhati and Nadi Shodhana. So Kapalabhati is the stomach pumping breath. It's the skull shining breath, shining skull breath. And for this, there are quite pronounced exhalations through the nose. So it's always a good idea to have some tissues around so that you can mop up any expulsions, and a glass of water. Whenever you're doing breath work, it's easier, particularly as this is an autumnal practice at this time of year, to get a dry throat. So having a glass of water, or perhaps a warm herbal tea to hand if you like warm drinks. And once you've got your comfortable seat, one of the key things is just to find that sense of lift in the body and allow it to be a comfortable lift. It doesn't need to be really, really rigid, and we want to be able to try to create that sense of space and length without a massive amount of muscular effort. That's the key thing. That's why we do all the yoga postures. And in breathing, often we feel like it would make sense to take really, really deep breaths. But when you're doing a breath practice where you're focused, a 3/4 inhalation is much easier to work with than a very, very full deep breath. So these are my hints and tips for getting set up for your breath practice. Always trying to find a little ease in the breath. If you find your shoulders hiking up to your ears, if you're very tight around the jaw, if you find your hands very rigid, you're usually holding tension, or perhaps using a pattern that's not very helpful for you. And in breath work, it is important to go with ease. In some breaths are forceful, but we still want to feel at the end of that we are at ease. We haven't created too much effort. But also the other thing is that you don't feel breathless as a result of your practice. So if you do feel breathless or you begin to feel uncomfortable, always relax back into a natural breath. Take a few goes with that. Come back to the practice if you want to, or perhaps it's just not right for you on the day. And an experienced yoga teacher, one who is perhaps quite practiced with the breath themselves, will be able to give you more advice. I'm always happy to do so. So please go from this video to the actual practice, where I will talk much less about the setup and much more about the techniques. I'll see you there. Namaste.